Walid, thank you for being on my show today.
Thank you for hosting me.
You are the CEO and co-founder of Addenda, that is currently moving insurance into the blockchain.
Correct. Thank you, Avi, for hosting me as well.
Can you tell us in a nutshell what Addenda does and what's your kind of vision going forward?
Sure. I mean, down the line, at the end of the day, Addenda wants to be the integrator of all insurance companies in the Middle East from a tech point of view. We want to allow them to communicate with each other, whether it's for claims, premiums, or otherwise. So we want to be the communication layer. We're starting with motor insurance recovery. In a nutshell, you and I have an accident. It's my fault. I go to my insurance company, you go to your insurance company. In 3 days, we're sorted. We're out of the picture. What happens next is these insurance companies, when they're reconciling money between each other, it takes anywhere between 6 months and 3 years, which is a very long, tedious manual process. And we want to digitize that and automate it via the blockchain.
So can we break it down a little bit? What pain point exactly are we addressing here? From my understanding, insurance companies, when recovering from each other, take time just because they kind of slow down responses, and it's a case of paying someone after the goods have been delivered. So the feeling that I get, and of course talking to other insurance companies, is that they just kind of delay payments, and it's just generally hard to recover because it's a cash flow thing for insurance companies. But what pain point are we exactly kind of addressing here?
So the cash flow issue is one of the main problems. One of the other main problems is the overhead involved, and the manual process being the fact that most of these recoveries are done via FedEx or Aramex, or they're largely paper-based. The more convenient ones are probably done via fax. So it's an ecosystem that's vying for disruption at the moment. And
so you're moving things from fax
all the way to blockchain in one go. Yeah, that's the intention.
What is it about blockchain that is enabling you to do more here than just a typical automation system or anything backed by a database? What's the value add that blockchain gives?
100%. So, I mean, I get asked this question all the time, and I usually have canned responses for it. But to be very frank with you, if you look at it this way, you've got a bunch of people who don't agree on how much they owe each other. So I think I owe you $100. You think you owe me 80, for example, or something. And the difference is not exactly there. So there's a reserve and there's an actual. On the blockchain, there's a single point of truth. If you have 45 entities or 45 insurance companies on board, and you think I owe you one, everybody agrees to that value. So there's no way for me to dispute that with you, especially if you've got documentation on the blockchain that confirms it and is time-stamped on the blockchain as well.
But oftentimes, insurers don't agree what they owe each other. You know, cases of agency repairs or overpaying for certain repairs and things like that. So how does, I mean, from my understanding, there would be always an actual communication required between two insurance companies and a negotiation process. Absolutely. So does Addenda come in once that negotiation is complete?
No. So then that becomes, at the moment, we are the negotiation layer, but it's time-stamped. What I want to do down the line is standardize that process, because at the moment it's not standardized. So for example, without naming certain insurance companies, I might have 3 years of repair while you have 5 years of repair. And I'm not liable for the 5 years, I'm only liable for 3. So you're gonna ask for 5, but I'm gonna only pay you 3. But if Addenda standardizes that value across all these insurance companies, that if you don't negotiate on a macro level, it becomes much quicker for you to actually reconcile once you agree to a certain value. So for example, with loss of use, i.e. Rental car usage, you've got insurance companies negotiating over peanuts and really delaying very large claims or volumes of claims that are huge, just because they don't agree on loss of use values that are negligible in comparison to the overall value. We believe that if you reconcile much faster with each other, you actually save up so much more money in overhead, and you have cash in bank much faster.
You've actually done a great job of getting quite a lot of insurance companies on board in what I would call a relatively short amount of time. So how have you done that? Because typically we found that insurers are kind of resistant to change, especially when it comes to, you know, some getting involved in a core part of their process. So what approach have you taken, and how have you been able to get that many insurers on board?
I have two answers for that. The first one is, and I don't want to go on a monologue, but the first one is, when you're hungry, you're going to do everything it takes. So essentially, my brother and I co-founded the company about 1.5 years ago. We developed the product, and then only after 1.5 years did we sign the first company, which was Wataniya Takaful. But we kept pushing as hard as we can in the market. There's not one person I didn't approach in the market, regardless of his position in any company that I could speak to. And that kind of goes into the second point, which was whenever we go on a sales pitch, we're never selling. I'm learning. Because anybody I'm talking to in the insurance ecosystem at the C-suite level or middle management is either older than me or more experienced than me by default. I can't walk into his office and tell him, I'm going to fix your process because it's broken, because I don't have the authority to do so. What I do is I say, tell me what's wrong. And kind of like a doctor, we kind of built the use case around it. So it wasn't a lot of blockchain problems are that they're solutions looking for a problem, whereas with us, we found the problem and then we built a blockchain around that.
Do you find, though, that there is a difference in the kind of things identified by insurers? Do you find that some have a problem, in one way and others have it in a different way? And do you find that you have to kind of customize solutions for them, or do you have to just build a product and insurers have to kind of choose whether they use it or not?
That's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is each one of them does recover in a different way. And that's one of the most niche things in insurance. I mean, there are so many other things where each one of them does it in a different way. You need to find a way where you can standardize the process and bring all of these players on board. At the beginning, you'll probably resolve only a portion of recovery, and they'll find as insurers that the process, the ROI they're getting is not immediate. But like we were talking about before this, if you're running a business, you don't think about immediate ROI only. You have to think about long-term ROI. So there's kind of a bell curve where at the beginning you have the most innovative insurance companies who joined us. These are on an individual basis, like me and you, the guys who go out and buy a flat screen TV as soon as it comes out because you're obsessed with the technology side. And then you had the early adopters who were insurance company 3, 4, 5 to join our platform. And then you have the late adopters. And at the end, we're sure a portion of the market will be the very last to join, who are the most resistant to change for many, many, many reasons.
So the approach you're taking is you're building a product, you're listening to everyone, you're taking everyone's feedback, but ultimately it's your decision in terms of what features you want to incorporate and what you kind of park aside.
Yes and no. So what we are done so far is, out of the 8 companies we have on board, we meet with the COOs on a regular basis where we say, listen guys, there's I don't want to call it a consortium, we call it a market agreement. What do you guys think about proposal X? And Kareem and I, my sibling and I, we propose something to them. And from there, we go ahead with that. So for example, I want to standardize one part of motor insurance claims at a time. I want to standardize how they pay out for rental cars. So if I get consensus from them, I deploy that solution. But then whoever insurance 9 or 10 that joins afterwards has to agree to this by default, because it's already the system. So the earlier these insurance companies join, the more decision-making capabilities they have on the future of digitized insurance, recovery, claims handling, anything you want to call it.
So where does the process finish at the moment? At the moment, it's a reconciliation mechanism, and once the system says that there's a reconciliation here and both entities agree that a payout is due, then how does the payment happen? That's presumably still
off-chain.
Off-chain.
Correct.
But you can't think about blockchain and not think about or not bring up cryptocurrencies. Yes. So are insurers going to be paying each other in Bitcoin soon?
No, I mean, I'll tell you what, I was a proponent of Bitcoin. I bought my first Bitcoin in 2012. I sold my first Bitcoin in 2012. So, all right. But putting that aside, I want to move away for now from anything that requires me to be regulated, to be very frank with you. So what we're doing is we're focusing on the moment of intimation, okay? The moment a police report comes in, and then all the way until recovery, reconciliation, and archive of the claim. But the actual transaction that's happening between them, when insurance companies, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you probably know a lot more about insurance than I do, when they net, they don't net just for recovery. There's co-insurance involved, there's so many other elements of reconciliation. We identified maybe 7 different types of reconciliation that are needed before you net every quarter. So a portion of why the payment aspect is delayed is not just because they don't want to pay for recovery, but rather there are so many other reconciliations between these 2 companies that need to be resolved first. We're transacting now on the recovery layer, but we want to go into co-insurance, we want to go into reinsurance, and any kind of insurer-to-insurer financial transaction. So that down the line, I have the capabilities to do that, what you just said, wherein we have a payment gateway, and you can transact via the payment gateway.
There's also a lot of reconciliation that happens between brokers and insurance companies. So in our office, we have our reconciliations department that's going through thousands of entries. And yes, we have a system, but let's be honest, most of it ultimately is manual because you're comparing your books
to their books.
To their books.
Exactly.
So have you thought about moving that into, or making that a feature of Addenda and opening up a whole new addressable market?
100%. So the only reason I started with recovery is because I accidentally came across it at first. And you know how it is with startups, you keep pivoting, right?
As a loss adjuster.
Exactly. So I used to be a property loss adjuster, and I had colleagues who were dealing with motor insurance recovery. If they're watching this, I love you guys. But what happened with them was they were incredibly frustrated with the process. It was so manual. These guys were chain smoking because of how, stressed out they were. And whenever I asked them questions,
they were chain smoking because they were off chain.
Exactly.
Sorry.
So these guys were exhausted from dealing with recovery, dealing with people who said, "Oh, I don't agree with your books. I haven't seen this email. This guy's on leave." So it was very manual. And I thought, wait, I can do basic digitization, but then we can do so much more. And that's where we went. But to answer your question, absolutely. We'd love to talk to brokers. We've already spoken with some brokers. And I think you and I might have a conversation after this because we see huge potential for brokers. It's a broker-driven market here in the UAE, whether it's medical insurance, motor, fleet insurance, or any other type of insurance.
Yeah, just transactions, right? It's just matching transactions.
Basically, high volume, low value transactions.
So what's your revenue model? How do you get paid for building your product?
We incorrectly call ourselves the Netflix of insurance or insurtech. I'll tell you why. So essentially, I don't charge you for maintenance. I don't charge you for license fees, no integration costs. There are no costs in the contract we have other than the per transaction cost we offer. Transaction cost is cheaper or less than half of what it costs for you to Aramex that document. So that's what we're charging these insurance companies. The cool thing is also you're paying on a monthly basis. So if you don't like it, you leave this month. I don't lock them in for a year, to the dismay of our investors, of course. But I think you have to start slowly with insurance companies where you genuinely show them there is absolutely no risk in joining. There's no risk whatsoever.
Is there any value in an insurance company signing up for this and whilst 90+% of their recoveries are still off-chain because you've got 8 on board, but there's another 52, 55 that you haven't. So does Addenda provide a value proposition for reconciliations where the other party might not be on Addenda?
I thought about it at first, and I don't want to sound arrogant, but we don't want to do that. I'll tell you why in a second. The first person who ever tried to sell a fax machine went to some innovative person. He's like, listen, this fax machine does this. It prints a paper. It moves from here to here. And then the other person, the person buying it, says, okay, who else has a fax machine that I can move it to?
Yeah.
And the answer is nobody, right? But what we did was we found 8 companies that were willing to take that risk at the beginning. And all of those 8 signed in the span of a month and a half. We're as surprised as you are, by the way. But at the same time, I'm really impressed with the innovation that the insurance ecosystem has in the UAE. I only have 8, but I've signed them in a month and a half. And there's about 42 total insurance companies in the motor ecosystem. We are signing 2 more in a couple of weeks, hopefully. And then by Q1, I intend to sign as many as I can as well. The insurance ecosystem is not really balanced in terms of recovery distribution. So you'll find that the top 5 insurance companies in the UAE control a vast portion of the recovery market or have a lot of recoveries in them. So for example, we've got Addenda EIC and AXA and Al-Wathba already on board, which are pretty large insurance companies. Our other players are also sizable. And I would assume we already have between 25 to 30% of the recovery market in the UAE at the moment. Of course, if you get companies like Oman, Orient down the line, that's a real deal changer.
Given that insurers can only use Addenda when the other party is also on Addenda, don't you worry about the fact that someone might look at this and say, hey, this is a great business, let me do the same thing, let me be second but better?
Yes.
And then make it difficult for you to not only sell the concept, but then sell Addenda over and above that concept.
Yes, 100%. This is very interesting you say that. We have competitors, and they're doing a fantastic job. I think it puts fire under my feet to do the best I can. I would never talk poorly of them, and I've seen, or I could imagine, they would have a decent product. Recovery at the end of the day is not rocket science. So it's possible to replicate such a product. It's just that at the moment we have the market advantage.
But in your view, there has to be one.
It's a tricky question to answer.
So you can't exactly be like Netflix where, there's Amazon and Hulu and whatever.
I'll tell you what, look, technologically, it's possible to have 2. I mean, on a very base level, and this is in no way a similar comparison, Hotmail can send emails to Gmail, right? It's not the same. But I'm comparing, potatoes to apples here. But at the end of the day, if it does happen, I'm much more than happy to compromise with that. Competition is very healthy, but push comes to shove. The priority for me is that the insurance companies reconcile the payments they need to reconcile. I believe we provide, for the size of our team, an insanely good product. And the 8 companies who have signed are testament to that.
In your view, how far can insurance go into the blockchain? In your view, what are the kind of possibilities in the future? Some examples.
I love this. No, this is exactly where, because my co-founder is my brother, and him and I, we live together, we work together, and we have the same friends, so we talk about this all the time. I wanted to go into medical and life insurance. We want to identify life insurance fraud. So I want to identify stacking. I want to identify a misrepresentation in life insurance. Essentially, if someone had a life insurance policy but did not disclose it to the new life insurance company is applying to, or any type of medical fraud as well, wherein you're not disclosing previous chronic illnesses. So that was one side of it, fraud identification. But also for motor insurance, it can go way beyond. You don't need to have a no-claim certificate, for example. For reinsurance, there are huge use cases. I don't understand all of them, so I'll be very frank. I'm still studying as much as I can about reinsurance, but I understand that placement is a huge issue, both for reinsurance companies, reinsurers, reinsurance brokers, and cedents as well. So understanding where is the money right now in placement right now.
So the sky's the limit, really?
I think so, yeah. That's why really my vision of Addenda is to be the integrator of insurance companies in the Middle East, like I told you earlier. And until that happens, I've not reached my vision yet.
What challenges are you facing at the moment?
Plenty. So one of the main challenges is the one you just said yourself. Basically, why should I join if I have double work now? I'll be working on Addenda, and at the same time, I'll be doing my other claims with 30x companies. So overcoming that mentality by saying that someone has to be innovative, someone has to take the risk, someone has to go ahead and be has a first mover advantage. There are incentives for that as well, from Addenda to these companies. Not all insurers will accept that, but at the same time, you can't measure everybody with the same yardstick, right? Not everybody has the same innovation agenda or digitization agenda that other companies do have. So that was one major challenge. The other huge challenge we have, which I don't know if others would agree with me to, is lack of IT talent in deep tech. So things like we're developing it on Hyperledger Fabric. So we're constantly looking for people who develop Kubernetes, Node.js, AngularJS, and all of these coding languages. I have personally interviewed maybe 100 to 120 people for one position, and unfortunately, none of them had the qualifications they said they did. Exactly.
All right.
So that's a difficulty, and we're looking into all parts of the world. So I'm not just looking into Dubai. We've looked into India, Eastern Europe.
Sorry, just out of curiosity, how do you assess them? Do you actually give them like coding tasks?
Exactly.
So they say they have a certification, but then they can't carry out the task that you kind of assign them to do?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't care about the certification. The reason I say this is because you'll find that people who love tech will do it just because they do, and they don't necessarily have a certification. I've personally not passed DIP CII, for example. I went to Cert CII and I stayed there because I moved to Addenda. But what we do is we send them a task, and if they pass that task, then we assess them to see if they meet what we call the kind of the Addenda gel. If you're like us, if you think the same way we do. Now, there could be consequences to this because you don't want everybody to think the same way you do. Sometimes you want people differently. But the idea is, do you gel with us? And that's most important. So I'm more than happy to take a coder who's below average in coding capabilities, but can gel well with the rest of our development team.
So it's more cultural and
Absolutely.
attitude.
Absolutely. We don't care about, and a lot of companies say this, but we genuinely don't care about creed, orientation, religion, culture, nothing. All I care is meritocracy. Are you good at what you do? Let's go. That's all that matters to us.
I mean, that's what pays off the most in the long run in business.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you were incorporated in the DIFC FinTech Hive. So that's an incubator. Can you tell us about that experience and kind of a little bit about where you're headed?
Yes, 100%. So this was in July 2018. We got accepted we applied to FinTech Hive. It was just an idea between me and my brother. We had a POC that, I'm not going to lie to you, dysfunctioned on stage, live on stage. So it was huge as a problem for us. But
up until that point, you built it yourselves?
So at that point we had outsourced it, to be very honest with you. We used Upwork, and there was a company that we used there, and therein lies the problem. We outsourced it, it failed on stage. That was a lesson learned for me, that you need to do this in-house. But I'll go back to FinTech Hive. We were presenting to what at first I thought would be just 5 people watching us do it. But it was the C-suite management of all of the insurance companies on board the FinTech Hive initiative, as well as the IFC people. So they liked what we showed them. They thought that at the time it was a different solution, by the way. It was a life insurance solution. They were like, this is nice. It's a solution looking for a problem, but why don't you divert it a bit? And we were mentored by every single company, every single insurance company on the program and the bank. And that's what kind of pivoted us towards.
So you were pitching to these insurers one
Correct.
by one?
As mentors. And see, I haven't stopped since then. Any person I see as a client, I walk up to them as a mentor. Upfront, I go like, listen, let's talk. I'm not here to sell you this. If you buy it, that's awesome. But I'm here to learn from you so I can improve my product. And that's what allowed us to improve our product very fast. FinTech Hive specifically was a huge advantage for us. I think in the UAE now, it's getting to a point where there are more accelerators than startups.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful with which accelerator you pick. I would always opt for the governmental accelerators. So FinTech Hive, Hub 71, Mohammed Al Rashid Innovation Fund. I'm not saying this because we're part of all 3, but there's a bit of bias here. But yeah, it really helps scale us. I think my brother and I, being just 2 people at the beginning, would never have managed to speak to all of the people we spoke to without FinTech Hive.
I think that program has now come to an end, as you were saying, and you're moving elsewhere. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So essentially, the program came to an end. It was only 3 months. But we then, FinTech Hive subsidizes your office space, your licensing fees, and we stayed in the IFC. I even moved my house right outside the IFC.
Right.
On the other side, on the Satwa side, because it's more affordable. But what happened next was we got accepted into a competition, the MIT Enterprise Forum, Pan-Arab Enterprise Forum. We won that competition, and we got into Hub 71 in Abu Dhabi. And Hub 71 also gave us a very huge incentive program. So we've now got a portion of our staff, myself, I'll be as co-founder, I'll be in Hub 71, while a small portion of our staff will remain in the DIFC entity. Keep in mind, the insurance market is almost halved between Abu Dhabi and Dubai mainly. Okay, there are a lot in the Northern Emirates, but this is ideal for us. It's like all of these things that are happening in coincidence are just at the right time, at the right place for Addenda.
So how are you splitting this up? Is it going to be a case of you develop markets in Abu Dhabi, you find insurers in Abu Dhabi, you find insurers in Dubai? Or have you split your work as, okay, I'm going to build, I'm going to engineer, and I'm going to sell?
So I'll be honest with you, we're working on that. But jokes aside, what's happening is the following. When we started, my brother and I, at the beginning, when it was just the 2 of us, the roles weren't entirely defined. I was a big picture guy, and he was a very engineering, mechanics, number, accounting person. And from there, the roles slowly moved towards that. And in Abu Dhabi, I'll be managing mostly business development, onboarding new companies, and Kareem will be handling everything that's post-sales, i.e. training, and both of us wear many hats. So he's HR, he's legal, he's accounting, funding, business development, recruitment, and all of that stuff. Because that's how a small startup works.
As founders, you have to do everything. Yeah.
And it's exhausting. I haven't taken leave yet. In the past year and a half, there was 1 long weekend. But other than that, I love it.
So I know currently you're kind of raising funds, and you've just completed your seed round. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
What's the plan? What is Addenda doing 5 years from now?
Here's what I think, I hope. I want to have a consortium of insurance companies across the entire Middle East. We're very Middle East focused because we understand the problems of insurance in the Middle East. Today we're speaking to insurance associations and authorities in Bahrain, Qatar, here, Jordan. I want to go to Egypt, and I want to go to Morocco as well. Saudi might be a tough nut to crack, but I'm very excited to go to Saudi. I want in 5 years for Addenda to have really made any kind of communication between insurance companies become seamless via our blockchain, whether it's for claims or premiums.
So I believe you're an industry first. Are there similar examples in Western markets who are doing what you're doing here?
2 examples. So there's B3I, which is a consortium of about 50 plus reinsurance companies, mainly. There are some insurers in Europe, founded by Zurich, I believe Generali, AXA, and a few other companies. they mainly focus on excess of loss on their
Yeah.
blockchain. They mainly focus on reinsurance, actually. They have, and I hope nobody would be upset, what is a competitor to them called Blockstream in the US, who also has 50 plus insurance companies and also focuses on the same thing, mainly reinsurance purposes, although they have a subrogation POC that they've worked on. I don't view them as competitors as much as I view them as points of synergy. They're competing with each other.
Yeah.
I have a virgin market here,
Yeah.
wherein down the line, them and I can communicate either interoperability of blockchains or see some way where, because these are the companies that reinsure this region here anyway,
Yeah.
right? I want to just find a way to do that. I've spoken to certain people in B3I and certain people in Blockstream, and I think in a year and a half, once we have a large enough volume of insurance companies in the Middle East, we can work on solutions together.
Or they can buy you out.
You said it. I'm with you, but you said it. I hinted very heavily, but you said it.
No, but I think what you're doing is brilliant because it also brings a great deal of credibility to our insurance industry. It brings a great deal of visibility to how operations are being run in our market as a whole.
Exactly.
And I think that just increases the competitiveness of, us as a region. So yeah, it was a pleasure speaking with you, Walid. Thank you for being here, and wish you and Addenda all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll catch up with you very soon.